Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
It's my pleasure to introduce Natalie Henry, who's a graduate student at, she's getting a PhD jointly from University Paris Sud and INRIA and the University of Sydney. And she's going to talk to us about her thesis work on exploring social networks with matrix-based representations. Natalie.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll try to explain my PhD work in 50 minutes, so that's 3 years of work. It's about social networks and matrix-based representation. So basically my background groups 3 different axes. So it's graph theory. I work with Peter Eads at University of Sydney. Information visualization. My co-supervisor in France is Jean-Daniel Fequet. And the application domain is actually social network analysis. And I work mainly with sociologists, historians, and analysts from French institutions. So let's talk about social networks. So what is it? So social networks are actually a set of actors, which are people, connected by relations. So like me and my mom. So we're a social network, 2 people, 2 actors, and 1 relations. Just a simple example with Facebook. So here is my friend network. So I'm in the center. I'm the red circle on this network. And I'm connected to all my friends on Facebook. So this is a social network. And we call this representation node link diagram. So basically you've got nodes, which are the circles, and you've got links, which are the links relation between the people. So social network are actually a very hot topic these days. So you've got all those online communities that are becoming very popular, such as Facebook, Flickr, Friendster. You've got online collaboration websites also, such as Wikipedia, where users collaborate to create an encyclopedia, and SourceForge, where people share software code. And there are also lots of work on scientific collaboration, so our researchers collaborate with each other. So basically the collaboration is when 2 researchers co-sign a paper, then they collaborate. So we're really, as researchers, interested into this to have a view of the field. And there are lots of other social networks. So the web is one. People are desperately in need of visualizing internet. So our people are connecting through internet. And you've got terrorist network and more generally communication networks. And also in biology, you've got disease transmission networks, so how the HIV is propagating, for example. So those are all examples of social network. My approach to analyze that is to use information visualization and exploratory data analysis, more particularly. So I'll explain more about that just now. So let's take Hanscom numbers. So it's 4 series of x and y coordinates. So 4 series of points. If I run statistics on this, I actually see the same statistic for all 4 series. So for example, I take the average or the mean of x and y, and I got the same number. So from this point, I would say statistics says all those 4 series are actually equivalent. But if I transform that into a visual representation, so using a basic scatter plot and representing each point by x and y coordinates in the space, then I can see very quickly that those 4 series are actually very different. And this is the main purpose of exploratory data analysis. So you answer a question you didn't know you had. So you didn't know what you were looking for. You just wanted to get insights about those numbers. And you want to look at the data from different perspectives. So it's not replacing statistics, it's complementing it. You want to look at the raw data from different point of view to try to get insight from it. So that's basically my approach. Now, let's talk about network visualization. So usually social scientists start with node link diagram. So I explained a bit earlier. It's just nodes like those squares here connected by links. And here's, for example, a nodeling diagram of the InfoVis research community, the largest component. So it's like 100 researchers connected when they co-sign a paper. So usually here you can actually see something. But if you go to larger nodeling diagrams, so let's say that one, which is 4,000 actors, then it's not the same problem. You can't really read the names, and you can't really see who's connected to who. So after a lot of work filtering and assigning visual variables, most of the time you can achieve a very nice representation, such as that one. So that's the same network that the previous one, except that someone manually placed the nodes in the space and attributed colors and size. So here it's actually researchers of InfoVis. The size means how many papers did they publish, and the color is actually how many references did they get. And here what you can see very fast is that big red node here. Who's that guy? It's actually Ben Schneiderman. And then you've got those 3 ones that are densely, strongly connected. So the links, the width of the links means the number of collaboration. And you can see George just here. Fortunately, you can't really read the name, but and he's connected to Jock McKinley and Stu Carrott. So basically, what social scientists want to see in those networks is the communities, so people densely connected, such as this area here or here, and central actors, such as those people that published a lot, or I cited a lot, or both. So this picture was obtained manually, right? People just moved the nodes, assigned visual colors and size. So what do you do with that big one here, 4,000 nodes? So you can do it manually, but then it will take a huge amount of time. So in one screen, one standard screen, you can see 100 nodes. So imagine 4,000, you have to spend a lot of time. But you can still do it if it's large. However, if it's dense, so it means that lots of links occur between nodes, then it's not even possible. You won't manage to have something readable enough. So what are the solutions now? So first solution, I remove data. So I sample. I take a random sample of my network and I visualize it. So of course, it's less data, so it might be better, easier to read. However, in social networks, what people want to see is the central actors. So if I remove randomly one central actor, let's say I remove Ben Schneiderman or George, then I have a vision completely misleading of my network. So I don't want to do that. So another solution is filtering. In that case, you filter, so you remove data, but according to a given criteria. Let's say I remove researchers that have only published one paper. So in that case, you can still have a better understanding of the network, though you're not looking at the complete data, so you might miss something. So you need to explore to be sure that you're not having missed some important thread in the data. So it can alter the structure, which is a problem. So another solution would be to cluster. So I get several nodes that are, for example, densely connected, and I just squash them in one single node. So it's compacting the data. In that case, the problem is I'm losing some information again. So let's say I will have MSR as one big node, but then I don't see what's going on inside that node and how people are connected outside, let's say. So it's also a problem altering the data and the insight that you can get from them. So the third solution is to look for alternative representation. And for example, you can use adjacency matrices. So what are they? So here's a simple example. You've got a nodeling diagram on the left. So people are actually orange and they're linked by directed links. So with the arrow here. And it means basically that A is connected to C. Now, this representation can be as a dual, so this graph or network has a dual representation, nodeling diagram and adjacency matrix. So it's very simple. In a matrix, it's like a table. And you've got the actors or nodes that are actually in rows and in column. Rows being the source of the edges or relations, and column being the targets. So for example, if I take A is connected to C, in the matrix I will have the row A is connected to the column C, and I will place a mark in the matrix. And now let's take a concrete example. This is a year of email between my research collaborator in Australia. So it's 400 people. And you take the aggregation of who sent an email to who over a year. What you can say about this is that, lots of people send email to each other, like almost everyone, except maybe those poor people here that send only an email to one guy. So if I now represent that as a matrix, you will see here that the gray means no connection, so no email, and the black point means one email. And if I permute rows and columns according to an algorithm that I'll detail later, then you can see the same matrix that gives you completely different insight on the data. So first you can see there are a big amount of gray in that matrix. So compared to the node link diagram, you would say, no, it's not that dense actually. So in a year, people don't send email to each other quite a lot. What you can see, you see the small groups here, small blocks, black blocks. And if you drill down and you read the name of the people, you actually realize that's a member of the same research group. And of course, they send email to each other. During a year, it's a click. They're all connected to each other. Now, what you can see and what is interesting is that one group, which would be like, for example, rows, send email to his own group and also maybe another group. So you can see also trends in collaboration between groups. The other thing that you might see is it's a very long line, horizontal and vertical lines here. And what is it? It's actually one or a group of people that send email to a lot of other people. And if you drill down again and you see who's sending email to everyone, it's actually financial service that actually refund people when they got a mission somewhere. So they actually send email to lots of other teams. So what you can see here, and my point is that with node link diagram, you might have misleading information and you can't really say much thing about it. But if you transform it into a matrix representation, you've got much more insight and very quickly. So from that point, my approach was try to see the users, try to see the social scientists and work with them and know what are their problems and how we can solve them. So I use participatory design. So with scientists from different French institutions. So basically it's 4 phases. Observation. I go to their place and see how they work. What are their problems? What are their data sets? What do they do every day? Then we come together in one workshop or several workshops and we try to have brainstorming together. So what would be the perfect solution for you guys? What do you want? What could be helping? So from this brainstorming session, we got a set of ideas and then we prototype and evaluate with them. So I ran actually 2 workshops with them. They're pretty busy people and expert, but I got several informal feedback. So we went back and forth during the 3 years of this PhD. The main outcome was that they use analysis tool with lots of menus. And basically they will have lots of statistics. They wouldn't know which method is the best one. They would just try everything. So they will systematically try everything, try all menus, all parameters, because they needed to find something they didn't know what they wanted to find. And what we found out also is that they draw pieces by hand because using the current visualization tool is too difficult for them. So most of the time they would draw lots of node link diagrams. So they use mainly node link diagrams, small ones. But the interesting finding was that they use also matrices. So from those 2 points, the potential of matrices and or users that actually know what this representation is, I decided to work on this and do my PhD topic about it.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Do they label their nodes or their links?
Yeah, so basically the matrices that they use, usually it's very small ones because you can imagine it takes a lot of time. They label by names or identifier, and then usually in the matrix they put values. So they do that when they got several multivariate links. So for example, you've got 3 kinds of relation between people, or you can imagine its distance or stuff like that. So they use it to think about how the different relations compare to each other most of the time, with my users again. So my approach is information visualization, but 3 different axes. So the first is perception. So we don't really know how people perceive matrices. So I wanted to work on this and understand, okay, how do they perceive it? What kind of features are important? Always taking in mind that I'm working with social scientists. So what is it for them to visualize social network with matrices? Second point was exploration. So okay, now I know how they perceive matrices. How do they interact with it to get to the data? And the third part is actually the communication part. So they find some things, theory or findings about the network. So how do they communicate it to the world? How can we help that? And here is the itinerary of my PhD. I'll detail each point later. So first, I was interested in perception and how people perceive matrices. And as I briefly told earlier, you can permute rows and columns of a matrix, and the permutation gives you different visual perception. So the idea was, okay, I'll try to make matrix usable, which means if you randomly order a matrix, it's completely unusable, right? You will have dots everywhere and you won't be able to see anything. So that was my first step, trying to collect all ordering algorithms that exist and try to assess their quality. The second work that I did was trying to combine matrix and node link diagram. The idea was that the matrix would be used for exploring, because you start with large and dense network. Then you manage to find whatever inside that you need to find. You filter it, and then you communicate with node link diagram, because that's the common, the most popular representation that they use to communicate information. So I did Matrix Explorer. I'll just talk a bit more later. Then I found out that actually there were problems when exploring matrices. So I fixed that by augmenting them with matlink. And the fourth and last work that I did in my PhD was to actually merge matrix and node link diagram, providing a way of exploring and also a way of communicating. And I will talk about it later. So, how to make matrix usable? So Jacques Bertin, French guy who wrote Semiology of Graphics, seminal book in Infoviz, showed us very interesting things about table, numerical table, very early, 1967. So it is a very simple table. So you've got countries, 5 different countries, and 5 different kind of meat. And it represents what meat is produced by which country. So what he showed us is that if you replace each value, each numerical value by a small, by visual variables, so a small rectangle, and if you permute rows and columns, you can actually find things very quickly in the data. So you can find groups. So here you've got A, B, and C, and they're actually very small groups, of course. A is composed only on 2 countries. But you can see that those 2 countries have the same profile of production. So you can see trends in the data. And you can see also that the B group, which is composed of France and Italy, has actually also the same trend of production, but opposite from group A. And you can see that very quickly. You can also see the outlier, which is actually Belgium, which really doesn't have a profile of production. And from this very simple example, you can go further. And you can say, okay, now, let's say France, let's say there is a law to be voted against the production of, let's say, horses here. Then France and Italy won't be really agreeing with that law. So should they go to Deutschland, Netherlands, or Belgium to try to convince them to vote with them against that law? Well, basically, they should go to Belgium, because Deutschland and Netherlands don't really care about it. They're more interested into the first kind of meat, whilst Belgium can be easily convinced because it doesn't really have a profile of production. So it's a very simple example with a small table. If you transform it visually, and if you order it, then you can get really information about the data. And it's pretty fast when you know the domain and the data. So from this, I tried to look at what kind of reordering method there is in the world. And there is a lot of methods to permute rows and columns, because it's related to lots of problems. So I'll just divide it in two categories. Easy. So we've got table-based ordering methods. Principally, it's from the field of biology. So you've got gene expression table, and what happens is you've got genes in rows, and you've got different conditions, experimental conditions in columns, and you want to reorder rows and columns so you can see genes that are expressed the same ways in the same condition. And so, of course, the way of permuting these rows and columns I mean, there are many ways to compute those things. The second one is related to graph linearization. So the idea is you've got a graph, and you want to put all the nodes into one single line, and you want to optimize such functions such as minimizing the number of crossings. So there are also lots of methods about it. And what I did about that is I tried to mix both. So I tried to take a graph, transform it into a table, and then apply ordering methods on it. So I want to explain it because it's a bit complicated, but I can talk about it later. So from that, actually the question is, okay, we've got lots of methods, but what is a good ordering for social networks and for social scientists in particular? So I went to see my social scientists. I show them nodeling diagram, metrics, okay, reorder it and tell me what is good and what is bad. And I come up with this representation. So basically what social scientists want to see is those large crosses here, which are central actors. So in a nodeling diagram, you would see it like a person connected several communities or having many links. And they want to see groups which are blocks in a matrix and are densely connected community in a nodeling diagram. So they want to see click, for example, here. You can see that they're all connected except the diagonal. They're not connected to itself. And here you can see that the block is not complete, so it's a community and not a click. There are some missing connections here. But so this was a manual ordering, right? So I went to see them and I asked them. So the question from there is, what is a good automatic algorithm? How can I choose my automatic algorithm so it fits their need? So all the algorithms are designed from formal measures. Like I try to minimize the distance between rows or between columns, or I try to minimize the crossing. But the question is, can we characterize those ordering according to the visual feature they produce? Because I don't care about the formal measures. I want to see the communities, I want to see the crosses and stuff. So my approach on this was to perform empirical studies with them and try to understand how they perceive groups and how they perceive different orderings. So I ran several experiments with users on digital pen and paper. What happened is here you've got the master's grade of University of Paris. So in rows you've got all the students, and in columns you've got the course they choose for their master's. And I reorder them differently from different algorithms and try to characterize what visual features would appear. So then I ask students mainly to draw on the visual matrix the groups and try to name them. So they had to perform very long experiments and trying to figure it out, not only the group, the visual group, but also trying to give him a meaningful name. So from maybe 30 of those people performing on several data sets, I just get all the results and superpose them on top of each other to try to see if there were common groups. So here, what you can see is that there is no common groups actually. So the more white it is, the more group has been chosen by people. But when it's ordered, you can actually see there are some consensus. So for example, those groups here have been chosen by almost all the people. And if you look at the name, you can see that actually those ones circles in red have the same name. That's students that chose cognitive psychology courses. And users, most of them, like maybe 80% of them, were able to find out this group and giving a meaningful name. So from this experiment, the question is there a good algorithm, a good automatic one, to find groups or for a particular type of data? And so what we found out is that with different algorithms, so this is different algorithms always on the same data set with students, that people find the same group, so here it's split in 3, here it's actually a single group, and they're able to identify it as cognitive students. So the question is actually more complicated than finding one group, because maybe finding a group that is split in 3 is good because people could identify another group. So the question of is there a good algorithm is very hard to answer. Yeah?
Just to be clear, your algorithm, the labeling is happening from the people that your empirical thing.
Yes.
Right? So they're just saying this is a group and then
Yeah.
you label it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you code it because, of course, they will say psychology and some other will say cognitive science. So you have to code it and say, okay, I consider it's the same notion. But yeah, they give the meaningful name. Or you got also people that call them group 1, group 2, group 3. But then you try to avoid those ones. And so no, there's not a good algorithm, even not mine. So what can you do about it? So first, it saves a huge amount of time to start from somewhere. Because if you look at people that started with random or alphabetical ordering, they couldn't do anything, basically. Or they had to spend, first they spent twice the time trying to figure out which group was going on. And they couldn't find anything. Whereas in the different ordering algorithm, we found that they found different groups. And that was, first they found something, and that was sometimes quicker with one ordering than the other one. And what we found out is that analysts need actually several orderings to find a consensus in the data, because sometimes it might appear in a group with one ordering, but it's just an artifact, and it will be split in others. And so then you need additional things than readability. You need interpretation, which is very deeply linked to the data, and then you can't do anything about it, basically. So the human has to go and decide. So I focus on two things. Help people reordering, because most of the time they start from somewhere but they're not really happy about the ordering and they would like to try other things. So I develop a set of interaction to move groups and interacting with the matrix on a more intuitive way than actually just sorting with buttons or stuff like that. So more direct manipulation kind of interaction. And also I focus on interaction to find a consensus on the data. Try to get the truth on the data. So just a simple example. There are many features. I'll just decide that one because I think it's an important and simple one. So basically, if you give people the possibility to cluster, to recognize groups in a matrix, like with interactive clustering, you just use lasso selection and then they decide of a group. And then if you offer the opportunity to reorder, then you still have, it's the first step towards finding a consensus in the data. So for example, you can see that those cognitive students are actually the purple one. If I reorder in a second different ordering, they will be split in 3. So you can wonder why, and you can drill down and maybe decide if it's a group or not. And you can see, for example, that the pink one, they stay grouped, except maybe those ones here. But so it's a first step towards trying to find what is really in the data and what is not. And so the message here is try to give several perspectives on the data. So from this, all those interactions and metrics, I combine best of both worlds, basically, with Matrix Explorer. So I decided to give my users metrics and nodeling diagram. And of course, I concentrated in matrix representation and giving lots of interaction with it. It's just a simple example showing that once you've recognized group in one representation, you can interact simply and see how it is, how they are in the other representation. Very simply, the person selects a group in the matrix, and you see the related data in the node-link diagram. So it's very simple, and people usually understand it very easily because they're used to the representation. And of course, you can synchronize both representation by colors and all kind of visual variables. So just to summarize, I provided coordinated views and interaction to explore. And my hypothesis was people will use matrix to explore and node-link to communicate. But actually what we found out is that people use node-link for certain tasks and matrix for others. And usually they switch back and forth. Most of the time it's better that they got two screens, one with matrix and one with node-link. And it's more comfortable that you got three actually. And what I figured out is that switching from one to the other and switching from one representation, which is a cell in a matrix, into a link in a node-link diagram is very cognitively demanding. Like if you switch back and forth, then you're really tired at the end of the day. And so that was the main finding, is that it's very hard to switch back and forth. However, they use both representation to be able to figure it out if they were as a group or not. They use different layouts and orderings. So basically, they would use all those perspectives to find out if a group was really existing. So it means that we really needed both. So I tried to explore why would they use matrix or node-link and when. So social networks can be sparse, such as genealogical trees. So it's very sparse. Sometimes you can have loops, but better not talk about it. It's like uncle marrying someone or something. But when they're sparse, people use node-link diagram. It's because the matrix is mainly empty, so you will just spend your time scrolling. And the node-link diagram doesn't have lots of crossings, so you don't really need to go to the matrix. So in that case, they use only node-link diagram. Now for larger dense, they use mainly matrix. Like you're a female, they try and they wait for ages on the node-link and they say okay, and work mainly on the matrix. But though they switch back and forth, when exploring large and dense network, they switch back to the node-link diagram. And this actually exposed one of the main weaknesses of matrices, which is path-related task. So it's very simple, I explained just now. So in social network, of course, your focus is connectivity, how people are connected. So for example, if you want to see how B is connected to D, you'll see the path goes through C. So C is potentially interesting for you. And so people will actually achieve lots of those tasks, how people are connected, who is on the path between two people.
Can you clarify something for me real quick? I'd like to know, when you're doing most of these, it looks like there is no direction to your links. All of your matrices look to me like they're symmetric.
Yeah, they are.
But in the case of like email, you could have a directed link, right? So I'm just curious if your exploration here is mostly symmetric connections, or are you also looking at directed connections?
No, so I could do it. The problem is that almost all of the algorithms are designed for undirected graphs. It's much more complicated because for directed graphs, so you said it, the matrix is unsymmetric. And so the distance between rows is different from the distance between columns, and it might be linked. So if you move 2 rows, then you might change the distance between columns. So it's much more complicated than that. So it's right, I didn't implement the version with directed. You can visualize it, but you can't really reorder it, so forget it.
Okay, it occurred to me that especially in a matrix visualization, that might be really interesting. Because you could pick up on those asymmetries, which seems like they might be really.
So it's a big thing of research, trying to figure it out, how people perceive it. It's also very interesting. Because groups are not groups like blocks, so, but I didn't investigate that. Future work. So let's go back to path. So here I always show directed one because it's easier to explain. But so here, the good thing about finding a path in a matrix is that it's always possible. Because if you look at this, how can you find a path now? When it's too dense, too large, then it's kind of madness. So of course you can invent highlighting or filtering, but it's very difficult though to perform those tasks. So however, the problem with matrices is that it's damn tedious. So I'll show you a very small example, same one. So the rows are the sources of the links and the columns are the targets. So let's go from B to C. So I see one link is here. Then I have to go back. So C is my target. So I have to go back as C as a source node. So basically I have to go back to the rows. And then from there, I can go to D. And you see that here, actually it's much more complicated when the matrix is large because you have to scroll down and imagine you've got more than one intermediate. Then you have to figure it out scanning the full matrix basically. So it's almost impossible. I mean, you could do it, but then you will become mad pretty soon. So the idea is my third PhD contribution is try to augment matrices so people don't have to switch back to node link diagram, and especially for those tasks. And the idea is very simple again. So you have all the links that are displayed as a linear static graph on the sides of the matrix. And in addition, you add interaction. So on mouse over, you can see actually, oops, sorry, I need to stop it. So on mouse over, you can see actually all the links departing from one node. So you've got an idea of the connectivity. If you click on one, now you can see one shortest path. So if I stop here, you quickly have an idea of how far they are connected. So here, the hop is like 3. They are connected from with 3 intermediate people. And you can read quickly who are the people connected. And you can go on. You can select one and do multiple paths. So the idea here is to have static links and interactive links. And the interesting thing about this is that the linear static links gives you a feeling of what's hidden in the matrix. So for example, here, you can see there's like lattice kind of pattern. And it's actually a community. So of course, when you're used to it, you see it much faster. But here you can see there is a community. So it means that down there, when the matrix is hidden, you can see that there is a community. And for linear matrices, it's even cooler, because you can see those links here leaving your viewport. And you can feel like, oh, there are people that I could be interested in outside of the viewports. So it gives you things that in a traditional matrix are impossible to find. It's that, hey, you're potentially interested in someone outside the viewport. And you can see here, for example, that there is a community down there. So you might want to explore it. So you've got a feel of the structure of the graph. Now the problem is when you've got one person here and one person here, and you display the shortest path, one intermediate guy might be outside of the viewport. So the good thing is, you know it. Actually, it's very simple. You look at that, you're, oh yeah, there's someone I'm potentially interested in. But now, if you have, for example, this matrix is 2,000 people, imagine that guy is 2,000 rows this way on the right. Then you have to scroll down a huge amount of time. And if you have to do that several times, you become completely lost in the matrix. And it takes time, and it's very frustrating. So we designed, with my collaborator Niklas Elmqvist, a method to fold the space. So the idea is to fold the matrix as a piece of paper. I'll show you a quick video of that. So you can see more point of focus. So basically it's very simple. You just scroll down, but instead of losing the first focus point, you see the second one. And then if you want, you can adjust the zoom level of one part or the other if you want to be able to see, let's say, the communities. And you prove that it works well for matrices and social network tasks. So let's go back to that question now. People, do they use matrix or node link now? So the good thing is with sparse networks, they use node link mainly, so didn't change anything. But for large and dense, now they use mainly matrices. So I say that with a small group of people, but I actually witnessed it, that they would switch less often to node link diagrams. Now the bad news is there is an intermediate category of networks that are called small world networks. Those ones are globally sparse, so basically there are not a few links. Let's use node link then. No, bad luck. They're also locally dense. Means that there are local dense communities that are tightly connected, and they are fewly connected together by small links. So should we use matrix then? Well, unfortunately, there's a very common category of social networks. So let's see what people do currently. So one of what we can say the best representation at that point was this one. So it's a node link diagram. And you can see here like blue dense connected parts that are communities. And between them you can see like pictures here that are actually central actors. So the good thing is you can see that if I remove this central actor, those two communities are disconnected from the graph. So you can have structural information. However, you don't know what's happening inside the communities. Is there a missing link here? Can't see it, so you have to zoom probably. Can you see what's happening between communities? Are all those people in the community connected to the central actor? You can't see it either. So our solution for that is, okay, let's merge both representation. So as node link are good for sparse, let's use node link. But for dense part, let's use matrices, because they're better for dense parts. And so here come node tricks. You select a dense part of the graph and you transform it into a matrix. Oops. I did it again. So what you see here is actually there is a small animation to go smoothly from node link diagram to matrix. And we actually found out that it helped people understand what's going on. It's Michael McGuffin's nice idea. And the good thing with this representation is you can interact very intuitively with it. So it's very easy to use drag and drop and remove people from a matrix. So I'll show you with the pen tablet. So basically it's like using a pen, right? And you just draw the communities and you can see them. Oops. Stupid. So you can circle with the pen and then it transforms into a matrix. So what you can see here is that you've got one matrix which is a click except the diagonal, so everyone's connected to everyone. And the other one is actually some missing links. So the blue means link and the white means no link. And so you see there is a cross in the matrix which is almost empty. It simply means that the guy in the matrix is not connected to anyone, but he was placed close by the group, so you could assume that he's part of the group, but he's not. So here you can really quickly see it. And simply by drag and drop it out of the matrix, you can adjust the community. So it's very intuitive. So from that, we try to explore larger graphs. So of course, when you've got a very large network, you don't want to circle all the groups one by one because it takes a lot of time. So you can use automatic cluster algorithm, or you can start from a matrix. So here is an example, or I start from a matrix, and I select the communities I'm interested in, and I want to see how they're connected to each other. So I just drag them into a matrix representation. So I just select a group of rows and drag it into the matrix version. So it's a way of filtering the graph at the same time. So in that case, what is interesting is that you've got two communities that are extracted from, that are very close to each other in the matrix. And you could imagine they were connected, but when you drag them, you see there is no connection. So that's when you can disambiguate also the matrix visualization. So if you do that again, then you can see the links. And the good thing is you can use it for communicating. So of course you can use it for Explorer because you drag and drop and you edit your matrices. But you can also use it to communicate your findings. Simply you can remove, once you found out what are the community, you just remove the name. And the beauty of this is that you can minimize the matrices so they become very small, but you can still see the pattern of connection inside the matrix.
Just a clarification on the labeling. So for each little matrix, there's
there's 4
names. Does that mean each name is repeated 4 times?
Yeah, so why I did that is because I use it on a pen-based tablet, and usually there's people all around so they can see the names from all around, but 2 are enough. Even 1 is enough when you know how to read it, but usually 2 are enough. And so from this representation, you can represent the InfoVis research community, which could be that one here, for example. So it's 100 nodes, and it takes into a very small space. So you can communicate easily. It's also a tool to do that. So from this, I drew down with the problem of central actors. Okay, so I've got central actors, such as me, who's collaborating with people from Paris, but also people from Sydney. So where should I be placed? In which community? Should I be placed in Paris or in Sydney or between them? Or maybe in overlapping communities? So you can imagine if I'm coming here, I'll have 3 communities, so we'll have 3 overlapping communities. So imagine with many central actors and many communities, then you can't see anything. Or should I have hierarchy of communities? Then it becomes pretty hard to read. So the idea I got with Anastasia Bezarianos from the University of Sydney, why not duplicating those people? So I should be both in Paris, both in Sydney. I'm duplicated. And now the question is, what is the user in understanding on this? Is it misleading? What happened? Is it good? Is it bad, basically? So I won't detail the full experiment because it's a huge one. But mainly, we thought that no duplication will give you a more accurate community view. Example. So this is the same network. And you see central actors are defined as people connected to everyone in both communities. And you've got yellow, 1 yellow here, and 3 blue, 1 here. And if you choose to so they're put in one community, whatever, you just random one. If you change them of community, then you see very different visual feeling of the network. For example, here you can see that those 2 communities are kind of equivalent in size. But now if you change it, then you will say, ooh, this one is very small. And so if you duplicate people, which is symbolized by gray links here, then you can imagine you've got a better view of the communities. Now the question is, does it impact the understanding of the network? Am I feeling that there are less connection between the communities or not? And so the result is that you minimize the misleading effects by visualizing the link the link between the duplicates, and by offering interaction. So you offer users to create their own duplication, and you offer the visualization, and you minimize the misleading effect and actually help performing some of the tasks. So that was the last part of my work. So this is 4 different stages. And now, at the end of my PhD, I wonder, what about evaluation? How can I evaluate all those things? So first, I did some participatory design. So it's mostly informal and during the whole process. So you could say it's informing the designs, kind of validation already. Then you can go further and say, okay, I'm doing control experiments. So the problem with control experiments is it for specific tasks on specific data set with specific representations. So basically you've got very specific results. So you can prove that one representation is better than the other one, but though it's very limited. So I decided to run a case study. More realistic settings, real data sets, trying to see if we can find something about the data, real findings. And also a longitudinal study, but it's not included in my PhD. So I ran a case study over 5 months, actually longer than that, but 5 actual months working on it. And it's about our research collaborates in 4 HCI conferences, and it's 20 years of collaboration. So it's a pretty big network. We've got 27,000 actors, which are researchers actually, and you've got more than 100,000 relations. And I use it mainly using Matrix Explorer, and then later, because this was in long duration, later I used Metlink and Notrix. And actually I ran out in a problem that I didn't think about at the beginning, which is how to represent such findings. So I thought, okay, we can filter the graph and present a node-link diagram, filtered one. But how do I present an overview of the field? So I did some manual presentation. So basically you have this huge matrix here, which is like 30,000 by 30,000 people. And you annotate it manually, and you show some of the groups, and you can have some closer view, so if you want to have details. And then from here, I actually designed Notrix, sorry. So the idea came from here. You want to have the community and see how they're connected. And so I designed this representation where you can have an overview, a very fast overview, and some details into it. So here you've got the Notrix overview with small matrix without the name of the people, just the name of the community. And here is the closer view where you have all the details. And I just have fun doing some other stuff, like a matrix which would have some magic lenses where you would see the inside of the matrix as a Notrix. So lots of merging things. So basically, what have I done? So I look at the problem from 3 different perspectives, while the third one, communication, came a bit later. But so the idea was to work on realize what was perception. How do you perceive matrices? Explore. How do you explore them? How do you communicate? So now, what do I want to do next? So there are very interesting questions about the evolution of the network, how they evolve over time, how groups are becoming groups. Do they split? Do they become, what was the history of one community? And this, of course, is linked to perception, but it's also linked to exploration, because now you've got much larger data sets. And so you need interaction technique to do that. And also communication is now very hard, because a static picture is not enough. Maybe you need a sequence of pictures, or you need a movie, so a video. That's why that's one of my focus. So my main goal in research is to stay with the flow. So I won't try to pronounce the name of the guy who came up with this, but the idea is very simple. So in research you have, well, in life in general, you've got challenges, which is, if you got too much, it's very hard. You're very scared that you can't manage doing it. But though, there are things that you know, your skills, but if you only do what you know, then it's very boring. So the idea is to stay between both. You want to have a bit of challenge and a bit of things that you know how to do. And to do that, my point of view is to have larger perspective, let's say, doing time-related data, visualization, and understanding evolution of networks, but while keeping small projects where I know I can actually do something about it. So the first step that I now started because I finished my PhD a few months ago is to try to see the evolution of social networks. One project I'm involved in is the visualization of how people collaborate at INRIA, so my French research institute. So this is a very old one, and they created teams at the beginning, and now what happened is that people collaborate all over the place, and sometimes not even in their own team. So they want to just create new architecture, new teams. So I'm helping on this project. And there's also another one on Wikipedia where people want to be able, want to see what's going on in the supervise, who's working on what page, and how does that thing evolve. on other types of data. So there's people from Institut Pasteur in Paris that are very interested in using one of the tools that I created because they got huge networks and they don't know what to do with it, basically. It's lots of data and they can't see anything. So they're very interested in matrices to do that. And more generally, there is this project with MSR on reactivity and how people, how can we show user activity, how can we reflect the activity to users. And as a special case, I'm really interested in supporting longitudinal and qualitative studies, and particularly because it's very important in InfoVis. We don't really know. So as I said at the very beginning, we want to answer a question we didn't know we had. So how do you evaluate that? So basically the idea is, okay, we give the tool to real people with their real data, and we want to study how they use it and try to get the benefit of this. But though there are many problems, to do that you need to log data, and you need to know what you want to log, how to log it. And there is this new, this very potential, this very creative way. How do you visualize this data? You need to analyze the data collected to see how people use the representation and the visualization, but you could also create representation to reflect it to users, to help them explore, to help them communicate on their exploration process. So there are also all that part that is very interesting. So to conclude very fast, my research approach is involving users. You have to talk to users before designing stuff for them. So it's participatory design. Several perspectives. You have to combine data mining, statistics, visual analysis. And the research direction would be time-related data and evaluation in general. And here is a small network in INRIA in 2006. I'm here in this small matrix here. And you can see there is more than 8,000 people. And you can see so those small matrices of different colors are actually the teams. You can see here that you got problems. Here you can see that poor team that did not collaborate at all in 2006. I won't say any name, but...
I'm sorry, what was the highly connected group of problem?
Here, that's actually distributed network people.
And so they're collaborating remotely?
Yeah, no, they're collaborating. So the problem is they're collaborating very strongly outside, so with other people and not in their own team. So for example, I'm in the information visualization team, so research group, and this team is with software engineering. So we've got tidy connection, but though we collaborate more with biologists actually. So what happened is we got same budget, same projects and stuff like that, same resources, but though we don't really collaborate with each other. So the idea is to create new research teams that make sense. So basically, for example, those two ones collaborate quite a lot, but they might be very far away from each other, or it might be more difficult to exchange people from one team to the other one. So the idea is try to have a new visualization, new communities, new research organizations. And also the thing is with INRIA, it's growing very fast. So the research director had no idea of what are the current themes. So he's got a set of themes like HCI, but he doesn't really know what people are working on. So he's looking also for trying to find clusters or how people collaborate. For example, we're very close with data mining people now. So he would like to be aware of that, for example, just to present INRIA to the rest of the world. Yep. Well, thanks for your attention. If you got questions.
So how would you scale this up to really big data sets?
Haha, very good question. So actually work on a multi-level matrix representation, but it's very hard. So, okay, so the question is already for like few thousand nodes, it's hard. And we don't really have solution for that. Like even with a standard matrix, it's very difficult because even if you have interaction techniques, you're dealing with huge amount of data. Now you can have those multi-scale representation that I tried, but though it's always the same problem, right? You're losing information because you're aggregating somehow. And also it takes a lot of processor time. So for example, the data of biologists, you can't load them in the memory. So you have to have lots of infrastructure architecture, hardware architecture to be able to handle that. So yeah, it's still a very hard problem. And that's what I'm going to run into when I will work with time-related data. But though the question is try to scale a bit more, and then we'll see later the terabytes of data that biologists have. I think it's also a completely different kind of problem because maybe, so what happens when you've got very, very, very huge amount of data? People work on different parts of the data, so it would be more maybe collaborative analysis. And most of the time they use data mining. I think you can't really visualize this huge amount, so you have to have other strategies. So it's different. And this is very small networks, actually. But it's already a challenge, right? So, yeah.
Is that a waste of adding additional dimensions to your matrix? I mean, your matrix is,
Yeah, so actually we got the idea a few weeks ago. So with a collaborator in Canada, University of Calgary is working on this idea of manipulating 3D shallow depth in a table. So the idea basically is to have cubes instead of simple matrix. And then you have to think about interaction with it. But yeah, for the moment, I must say that the problem of matrix, so this representation here, is you can have so many visual variables that you can't use them all. Because you have the inside, you have the links, you have the inside, you have the labels, so you can't use them all anyway. So if you had a third dimension, I just wonder how it will be effective. And so the idea and one of the paths is to be able just to interact. And when you interact with one or a subset of them, then they become actual cubes that you can manipulate. And it's very intuitive on the table. So basically, already matrix is very intuitive. So you just grab one, it becomes a cube, and you can turn it. So you can see the different dimension. But though there are work on the perception on this, and how it can be misleading, and what kind of data you want to represent. And so another suggestion is to use mélange, so which is the folding thing. But instead of folding, you imagine that you're actually cutting through different layers. And here you could visualize other data, but I think it's also a problem of perception. But yeah, currently you just change the colors manually, and that's the only thing we can do.
Do you have any way of maintaining sort of perceptual state as you're changing the colors or whatever? Because one of the big problems here is in making sure that you're staying oriented as you're changing dimensions.
Yeah, so that's a very complicated problem. It's funny because I work a bit on it when I wanted to visualize how ordering algorithm worked. And basically I wanted to show the process. So now the problem of that it takes huge amount of time if you want people to actually follow what's going on. Because you can't move everything. And when you've got 1,000 nodes, then people just want to skip it. And I'm afraid it could be the same for changing the attributes, though I didn't think of it. But maybe animation would be a good way, or I don't know.
The people you did the participatory design with, how long do they live in a data set?
So very different. Historian, all their life. So, well, that's French historian, right? So they go in the streets, and they take maybe several years for collecting data. So they use actually paper, pen and paper, poor people. And then in the night, they enter it in Excel, right? So, I mean, their data is everything. So the first thing when you show them something is they want to see the data. Where's my data? What did you do with it? So they live very, very long time with it.
So, that being the case, I would assume that these people would be spending some time working on a set of hypotheses or a set of investigations,
Yeah.
and then annotating their data, and then working on a different set of hypotheses and annotating their data. So the data gets richer over time, even if it's a static data set,
Yeah.
through the
But it shouldn't be-
iterative
yeah.
evaluation. How do you persist that stuff, the kind of hypotheses and labeling and grouping that the investigator is doing over these long or vast time scales?
So during the participatory design, the last session that I did actually came a very nice idea. So the problem is this, I work on 3 years on this, so I couldn't do anything. But the idea was you have something that shows you the history and also that can help you plan things and annotate. So we call it the history planner. So basically, currently what they do, they got hypotheses. So most of the time it's even before they collect the data, so they can ask the right questions. And of course they ask other questions, and what happened is that they test their hypothesis through statistics. So they don't really do exploratory analysis. So most of them, they have hypotheses like, I don't know, most of the time women collaborate more with men. And then they will try statistically and will say yes or no. And what happened is that at the beginning they said, well, it's okay, we can try everything. So that's what happened, right? They try all the hypotheses. Because you've got the body of literature who has whatever, 100 of hypotheses, so they will try everything. Say, oh, in my domain that works. But when you provide them with the visualization, they see other things. So what happened is that they got hypotheses, but they would like also, they're very interested to seeing the data, just to raise new questions. So basically you can't remove their current tools because they need to test everything, but they're really interested in seeing the data in a new way, try to find maybe new hypotheses. And when they got their new hypothesis, then they will try to go to statistical measures or models to do that. So that's the way they work currently. And also, so as I said before, they really love their data. So they're just having poster. It's nice because just talk about it together. So usually they're very alone people, contrary to us. I mean, I'm used to collaborating with lots of people, but most of the time they're doing like, I don't know, women in the 15th century in Brittany, and then you've got the other one who's doing men in the 16th century in Paris. So they don't really talk to each other. And the fact that you have visualization that help them also to say, oh, look, you have this hypothesis and stuff like that. It's also a source of communication. That's why I like the storytelling parts, when you have to explain what's going on with your network. And of course, when they see something intuitive like a pen-based tablet, they all interact. Even if that's not their data, they will go and do, look, I did that with mine, it worked. So it's a blend of techniques. Yeah, really. Well, I'm talking mainly for historians, but there are many other people that have many other ways of working, so it's a bit difficult to generalize.
Thanks again, Natalie.
Thank you.